What if you could leave every person you met in life in a more positive state than when you found them? Whether that be helping someone through a crisis, listening to those who need to be heard, or simply offering a smile to a passerby. What if every interaction you had, no matter how fleeting, made the world a better place? It won't just happen by itself. We need some kind of roadmap, a set of guiding principles to help us on our way. And let's base it on our hearts. With every beat, electromagnetic signals pulse out, generating influential energy. Our hearts also comprise 4 chambers. And if we learn to fill those chambers with the right things, we become a conduit for that energy, passing it on to our friends, our family, the people we meet, and inch by inch, we start pulling this world back in the right direction. So let's drop the cynicism and the negativity and allow ourselves to answer this simple question. What if I could leave everyone I met in a better place than when I found them? Inside the first of our 4 chambers is compassion, and it's where we can begin to invest some good into the world. Compassion is the ability to empathize, to care, to recognize when someone needs help and then helping them, even if they're a complete stranger. Because as you're about to see, a little compassion can give even the smallest acts extraordinary power. In an idyllic lakeside retreat in northern Minnesota lives the author Kent Nerburn. These days, Kent is a writer and has published several books on Native American history and culture. But some 25 years ago, Kent was making ends meet as a taxi driver. And it was while driving his cab one night that Kent had an experience he later came to write about. This story found its way onto social media and ended up being shared more than 3 million times, and the reason for that is because it truly demonstrates the value of compassion and our innate human instinct to do good things.
I didn't set out to be a cab driver. It was not a profession. It was a job. I was working to try to be a sculptor, and I wasn't making much of a living. I needed to do something else. So I took a job driving a cab, and I took what was called the dog shift. And the dog shift is when you drive overnight, you drive all night. You watch the rhythm of the city. I love this rhythm. I loved working within it. I loved the cab. Other than the dispatcher telling you where to go, you're totally on your own. You're cruising the streets of a city at night, and everybody gets in that cab eventually. Well, it was an August night that the story that's become well known took place. It was an August night, and it was late. The bars had closed down. So I get this call at 2:30 or 2 o'clock to go to this address, and I figured, well, it's some kids, some drunk kids going home from a party. You know, they're not going very far. So I said, sure, I'd take the run, and went to this apartment building. It was like a 4-plex, and no lights on anywhere. I thought, well, what do I do here? Do I honk? Do I drive away? A lot of times you get what they call the no-loads, where you drive up to somewhere and there's nobody there, and so you just take off again. Well, I got to this building, and there was no one there. I wasn't going to honk. I didn't see any lights. I had an address, and I always had the measure of my parents in my mind, because they were both getting older, both were fairly frail, and I always thought, what would I do? What would I want a driver to do for my own mother or my own father? So knowing that it was not a tremendously dangerous situation, it wasn't likely to be someone ambushing me for my $12 I had in my pocket, I went up and knocked on the door. And I heard someone say, just a minute, I'll be there. And I heard a sound of someone dragging something across the floor. The door opens, and it's this old woman, and I guess she was in her 80s. I remember she had this strange outfit on. It was like a pillbox hat from the 1940s, and I remember there was a hat pin in it, because my mother used to have hat pins and things. And she was dressed up, 2:30 in the morning. You get a feel for people and situations. And there was an air of ineffable loneliness about this woman. And I knew in my gut that this was something I had to do right. And she said, "I'm not very strong. Can you help me?" "Of course I'll help you." And she said, "I'm leaving for good. I'm not coming back." So I knew I was taking someone on her last journey, on her last ride from that home. And this wasn't something that I could take lightly. So I took the time, I took her to the cab and set her in, and she got in the back seat. They sit in what you call the queen's seat, on the passenger side behind you. And she said that the doctors had told her she didn't have much time. And she told me she had no family, she had nowhere else to go, and that the doctor had said she should go to this nursing home. She gave me an address, and I prepared to leave, and she said, "Could you go through downtown?"
I would like to go.
I said, "Well, it's not the shortest way." I said, "I know, but I'd like you to drive me by a few places."
Okay, sure.
And it became apparent to me that this was not going to be a normal journey. And there was no way that I was going to charge this woman for this fare, or a few dollars to me. This wasn't about me making a living. This was about me giving someone something important in life. I looked at her in the rearview mirror, and what I saw was a woman who was looking at her home for the last time. I didn't want to intrude on her privacy, didn't want to intrude on her reflection. But I knew that this was something deeply significant to her just from the way that she looked as we drove away. So we set off through the city, and she would direct me, "Oh, go down this road, go over here," and she'd point to a house and say, "This was where my husband and I lived when we were first married." She took me by an old hotel where she had been an elevator operator years ago. She told me the stories about running the elevator, about being in the hotel, about the people that she saw. She made her go by an old dance hall that had been converted to a furniture store. And she talked about going dancing, ballroom dancing with her husband. And we just drove through the city. We drove for about 2 hours, and we pulled up to the convalescent home. So I went around, opened the door, helped her out, and I knew this was she never going to part. I wasn't going to see her again. I might have had the idea that I would come and visit her, that I would become her friend, but I knew better. I had my own life. There was another person to be picked up. The next day would present another tragedy. There would be another small crisis in my own life. I was never going to see this woman again.
I have to pay you.
Oh, no, you don't owe me anything.
Oh, yes, I do.
And she said, "How much do I owe you?" I said, "Well, you don't owe me anything." Of course not.
You have to make a living.
Now, there are other passengers.
Oh, you're such a good boy.
And she said, "Oh, you're such a good boy." And just without thinking, I gave her a big hug. And I could see her eyes glistening. I could see I could feel her holding on to me as her last touch with the outside world. A woman with no family, going into an institution. And I knew that was the closing of a life, and that I'd been part of the closing of the life. She was going in there forever. And I was getting back in a cab and going down the street to the next person who needed something, the next person that was going to work, the next person that was going to be brandishing a gun, the next person that had a fight with his girlfriend. My life was rolling forward at a speed that I couldn't even comprehend. Her life was stopping. Compassion is a learned skill. What I learned in the course of this was to be attentive to other people's emotional situations. I learned to enter into other people's emotional realities. And it became one of the richest experiences that I could ever pass on to anyone, because you meet people where they live. You meet them where their heart beats. Through empathy with another person's situation, you can exercise compassion and you can give something to them. When I picked up the woman in the cab, it wasn't a choice of being a good person or a bad person, but by doing it, it wasn't that I did a good thing, though I did do a good thing. I'd given her my night so I could give her her entire life. I think that's one of the reasons this story has captured the hearts of so many people. People feel they're living in a mean world, and that we're selling self-reliance as a virtue, and really what we're selling is a kind of selfishness. People are not being raised to be their brothers and sisters' keepers. And you want to think you can do something. Giving is ultimately an act of creativity. It's the act of creating something new where nothing existed before. You're loving the world into existence when you give. And that, to me, is the artistry of ordinary living.